I can see.
All right, it says that we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Taylor. I'm the music librarian in the Art, Music, and Recreation Department at Los Angeles Public Library's Central Library. I am responsible for our books on music as well as a huge collection of sheet music. I also have the privilege of putting on events like these, both in person and online. And tonight I am very pleased to be joined by Audrey Golden, Gretchen Phillips, Larry Bob Roberts, and we've got Donna Dresch, Kaia Wilson, and Melissa York of Team Dresch. We are celebrating the release of Queercore. It is an installment in the Bloomsbury genre series. It's available in print, ebook, and e-audiobook. It is very hot off the presses, so we don't quite have it here at Los Angeles Public Library yet, but it will be shortly. It is a real treat to get everyone together for this event, so we are indeed recording. I'm just going to give some quick intros for everyone. Gretchen Phillips was a member of Meat Joy, who are a truly singular queercore band out of Texas. She followed this up by leading folk and rock bands of all sorts. Larry Bob Roberts did the Holy Titclamps zine in Minneapolis before moving to San Francisco. This zine ran for 19 issues between 1989 and 2003. It's an amazing document of the music and people and politics of that moment. And Team Dresch is one of the key queercore bands, releasing 2 albums of searing emotional anthems in the 1990s and reunited in the early 2000s to continue to play shows and release new music. And finally, we have Audrey Golden. She is the author of I Thought I Heard You Speak, Women at Factory Records, as well as Shouting Out Loud, Lives of the Raincoats, and of course, the book of the hour, Queercore. Audrey, before I hand things over to you, I wanted to ask you a question to get things set up. What would be your quick explanation of what Queercore is for the uninitiated?
Yeah, I mean, so this was something I had to think about when I decided to write about this as a genre, because in a lot of ways, it's not really a genre. But I think maybe one of the best and most helpful ways to think about queercore, both kind of in historical terms, but also in terms of what it means to people in the present, is a group of like-minded artists, musicians, filmmakers, zine makers, visual artists thinking about coming together under a shared ideology of putting queer identity first and out there and being brave and bold and, really bucking homophobic trends and laws and everything else that goes with that, and making that really visual and powerful in the face of homophobia and discrimination. So I think that's how I was really thinking about queercore when I sat down to start doing research for this book and thinking about how to sort of trace out the kind of historical beginnings of it, which I don't think there's necessarily a single beginning, and thinking about the ways that it has been shaped by so many different artists producing so many different types of music and art over the years, and how that has had so much resonance for so many people in the present and in the United States, but also really broadly outside it too. It's one of the things that I was really excited to think about in writing this book, was how the idea of queercore, even though for some people it holds a specific kind of time and place, how it's been taken up by people living under dictatorship, people living in places where identities are illegal. We're obviously not so far off from that here again, but and really taking up the mantle of queercore and saying, like, this is really powerful for me, like artists in Malaysia, artists in former Yugoslavia. And yeah, so that was a long answer to a definition of queercore, but I think a lot of those things are important to think about as we kind of jump into this conversation. Yeah, so thinking about that, all those things I said, I wanted to start by thinking about those kinds of ways of being bold and speaking out through music and zines, and the kind of difficulty of doing that. At the time that queercore really got its start, the difficulty socioculturally, the difficulty legally, because as I was writing this book, I initially wasn't going to kind of go back and provide like so much context for the social, cultural, and legal kind of life in these different moments. But then I thought, you know, there are people who weren't living at these times and don't actually have a sense of what it was like. I know when I'm teaching and I tell my students and talk about the Lawrence v. Texas decision and how quite literally gay sex was illegal in America until 2003. Like, so I think we have to go back and think about a lot of that stuff. But so I wanted to kind of open it up and ask each of you about the different kind of sonic, but also political forms that your work has taken to help to create what I see as such a bold and powerful and important movement. Anyone, feel free.
Just don't want to be the first to speak.
Except for acknowledging that we don't want to.
Honestly, when I think about, back in the day, I think that really youth had a lot to do with it. It's like you were just kind of like, fuck it.
Yeah.
And you had no worries. And just finding like-minded people was your Al-Anon, it was like the way to survive. And then just being around like-minded people and moving forward in the world, through the world, it just was very powerful. And it didn't seem hard. It's like all that other noise that was there, of course, it's around you. But when you're around all this love and it's like you matter, it really helps you keep going and try to create more art for other kids, that need that. I was in New York at the time. So it's like I had a lot of options. I wasn't in middle America, you know what I mean? So it's like, so you're making these zines, you're trying to make those connections with all these kids that are just totally outside of your world.
And knowing your sex was illegal, like having sex was illegal, made you feel like a pirate.
Totally.
I always kind of loved that.
It's kind of a little dull. It's a little dull right now.
Don't listen anymore.
Yeah, that's a good
It
point.
just lost the flavor, so I think we're going to turn straight.
Outlaw.
Just kidding.
Truly outlaw. Yeah. Can't actually remember what the actual question was. Maybe it was more of a I don't know. Maybe it was very loose.
It was very loose. Yes.
Gretchen, what you got to say? 'Cause
Yeah.
you're like, our idol here.
Well, I mean, I think that what you're saying about trying to make it easier for the kids is very true.
Yeah.
And so, I came out in 1978 in Texas, but it isn't like I came out in a void, because I came out in Houston, which was gay. And there was gay radio shows on the public radio station, and there was the gay bookstore, and there was, Montrose section of town that was full of bars, and I didn't have to feel all alone at all. But there was, because I'm so interested in media, there weren't the kind of media representations of lesbianism. Well, there always were like the bad ladies. Like, I loved that because they usually were killers, so I love that part. But I thought maybe people might, wish for, I mean, I'm sad that it's become so normal now, of course, but I think clearly I did my job too well, because it's quite boring. But as we were just saying, but yeah, I think being able to think about if it could be slightly easier for the people, who are younger than me, I really wanted to make it slightly easier, and also possibly for their fucking parents to go listen to an album or listen to something and to have some context. If they were like, I don't know if I hate gay people, I just don't know any. And it's, you know, being able to be really out as I've been since then has meant that people did know, they did know a lesbian. And sometimes I might have been the only one they knew. And that is, some friends have told me that that's what their parents said. I met your friend Gretchen, and
and you made them love you. I mean, I feel like that's kind of how it was for me too. It's like, I'm gonna make them love me.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Oh, God.
I love that there's a sort of industrial music component to this panel as well, where it's really, you know, something's working a mic somewhere, as a kind of a sonic a compliment. But I think that you don't understand, you know, this is the water that you're swimming in. So it being illegal and it, you know, it being, you know, all of that, that's how it was. And so it's also so ridiculous. Like that shit was just ridiculous. Same as now times. It's just ridiculous. So the way of being queer as a way of kind of really being able to see the forest for the trees, you know, because that ends up being what I think we can do, because we've made a decision to follow our own hearts. You know, we've all done something really, really strongly about our own selves in the face of active discouragement. And so when we have our gang, we are, as you're, you know, saying, Mel, we're being seen, we're seeing, we're young, and it's wonderful, I think, to be able to be with decisive folk.
Mm-hmm.
And how we found each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It just happens. It's just really amazing. I feel so fortunate.
Oh, I mean, every day I feel so fortunate for how many amazing good times I've had. And even if they incarcerate me in some far off land for being, and I felt this way all along, but now that I'm this old, I really amassed some amazing times. And it's like, that can never be taken away from me. How well I've lived and how much fun I've had and who I've gotten to be pals with.
Speaking of how people were meeting one another and coming together, I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time talking about zines.
Yep.
And sharing zines, making zines. And the way that zine culture was able to, through so many kind of obvious but also strange and sort of underground capillaries, make their way to different parts of America where there might not have been a kind of sense of the same community, and to different parts of the world where the same may have been true. So yeah, Larry Bob, should we start with you talking a little bit about zine culture? And I
mean, I first want to say Larry Bob zine was one of the ways that we could find each other. Like, it was a resource for like a listing of like a classified ads for people you wanted to find.
I mean, that was, you know, when I first, so I think sort of my entree into things was reading Adam Block's column in The Advocate. He reviewed a few zines, and, you know, I started getting like Homocore and JD's, Boysville, USA. And then, you know, it sort of snowballed from there. Like, you know, when I published my first issue, I listed all the zines I knew at that time, which was like about those three. And then, like, as it grew, eventually I spun off from my main zine, Holy Titclamps, to like a review zine, Queer Zine Explosion. And one of my focuses also in writing the reviews was, it wasn't necessarily so critical reviews. Like, it was more about like trying to list everything that was in there, because there might be like one page in one zine that might have a topic that somebody was going to be interested in. I wanted to make sure that people could find out that it was in there. So it was, really sort of more like a catalog in a way. And there was, a big part of zine culture too was trading zines. If, I would send my zine to somebody else, they were going to send me back one for free. We weren't going to charge each other for that. And, so there was sort of a cross-pollination that would happen from there. Also, like, I've run across, like, I ran an ad for Chainsaw in my zine. I've run across, like, my original, it was like Donna used this gel pen to draw the ad, and then like, it's cool when you Xerox it or whatever, and so we would contribute to each other's scenes too. That was another kind of cross pollination that would happen. And of course, Don was on the cover of an issue of Homocore too, with the yo-yo. Right?
I always thought to do that.
I have it.
I lived at the Homocore warehouse at that time, so it was really easy.
Yeah.
And I had the best job. I worked at Kinko's.
Oh, yes. Very important. Yes.
Yeah, very important.
I think the statute of limitations is run out.
Kinko's in New York?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
You probably saw it all.
I did. I mean, Midtown Manhattan.
The friend in Kinko's is so important. That friend in Meat Joy, Melissa's little brother, later in the 90s, he worked and he would get me the all important affordable color copies.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I'm telling you, it was, at the time I was involved in Riot Grrrl, so I did all our zines, New York Riot Grrrl. You gotta, it's all about knowing somebody.
Yep.
So I think I actually got the job at Kinko's for specifically that. So I could make these zines.
So you could embezzle.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually have a copy here. I brought some show and tell items.
Nice.
I have a copy of an original Meat Joy album cover that has some, am I holding it up properly to the camera?
Yeah.
That has some,
Oh, sweet.
some obviously Kinko's or Kinko's inspired production copying on it, which is amazing. And it almost looks like actually some gel pen in the corner. So that too. One of the things I was going to ask about zines, though Jody isn't here, but maybe we could have a tiny bit of a conversation about it. I'm now going to pull this out too. I have lots of show and tell items. I have Free to Fight. And it's not a zine, but the booklet that came in Free to Fight is sort of zine-like in ways that I think is just really awesome and really great. So it's Free to Fight, in case you can't, in case it's too small, an interactive self-defense project. And it really builds on what I think a lot of work was going on in so many zines. It has, obviously, I don't have time to go through the entire Free to Fight booklet, but okay.
The booklet itself is a piece of art.
I mean, that's what
the way Stella Mars made it, like the pages are all different sizes, and even if you didn't even read it, it's still an art.
And yeah, being, I'm a graphic designer, was then, still am. And when I got that, I was like, oh my God, vertical, skinny, long.
I know.
Did Stella do the artwork too?
She did the layout.
Was it
The front one?
who did the art t-shirt that one time?
Is it Robin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might have been.
Anyway,
Sorry. About who the artists were.
But yeah, they really are their artifacts, but they're individual art objects too, in so many ways. And one of the things I love about so many of the Queercore zines, but zines in general, is the way they show the hand of the maker in so many different ways, not just the Xerox aspect, but the sort of design, design thinking and the way that design affects the way that it's coming to a reader, the way you're holding it physically. Larry Bob, I know we talked about how you had imagined Holy Titclamps first as kind of like a broadside, a big kind of broadside, which creates a different relationship with the reader too, and the person getting it. It becomes something almost to hang. And yeah, I mean, I love that about zines, that they can have narrative stories, they have drawings, and they're so collective. Larry Bob, you were getting at this and talking about how collective they are and how they featured so many other artists and writers too, but they're also collective in that so many have drawings and contributions and even kind of double Xerox contributions from writers from other projects coming in. And so they're kind of these layered historical documents now to a kind of really communal practice, even if it's not in physical community.
But I think that the part of this is kind of our way of being attractive and attracting. When you make this is part of the personal ad of the zine is like, this is kind of great how tall and skinny it is right here. And
I started changing that to give to girls at shows.
Absolutely. I mean, never ever underestimate, why we're on stage. It's partly self-expression, but it's also an amazing way to meet girls.
Sorry for interrupting, Larry Bob.
Donna, I don't know if everyone heard you, but I think you said something that you also told me that I'm pretty sure I ended up putting in the book, was that you started Chainsaw the Zine to meet girls.
Yeah, it was like a way to network with people I wanted to be friends with.
Yeah.
Like Kaia.
When I was 16 and I was in very rural, very homophobic outside Springfield, Oregon, I got Chainsaw. I found it through Homocore. Very lucky.
And look where we are.
And look at us now. We're sitting together here in the panel.
Mel, you brought up Riot Grrrl and thinking about Riot Grrrl and Queercore. And it was one of the things that I was thinking about while writing this book. I talked to Larry Bob about it a little bit. And I think you told me you sort of saw them like siblings, Riot Grrrl and Queercore. And I was interested to kind of hear from you all about your thoughts about the kind of connection and distinction between Riot Grrrl and Queercore, because I believe it was a Team Dresch interview that I was looking at. And Kaia, I can't remember if it was you who said this or somebody else, but that both were connected and both were thinking about like feminism and being like boldly feminist and thinking about equality and making good music. But there was the kind of added discriminatory factor with Queercore of, sexual identity, and not just gender identity and misogyny. There was an addition of homophobia. And so it sort of pushed Queercore out of the, I guess, historical picture and kind of marginalized it in certain ways that Riot Grrrl has not been marginalized. And I think that's really important to think about, because as a teenager, I was really into both Queercore and Riot Grrrl. And I mean, admittedly, at that time, I wasn't really thinking about those distinctions. Now, looking back, I mean, I think about it a lot, and I think about the kind of forces that do create that kind of marginalization of certain histories. And I think it's really important to sort of recenter Queercore. So yeah, I'd be curious to kind of just hear your thoughts on the distinction between Riot Grrrl and Queercore, and if that sort of marginalization of Queercore in some way is something that you either thought about at the time or sort of reflect on, I guess.
Well, I think, for me, yeah, I was involved in Riot Grrrl, obviously, homocore shows, put on homocore shows in New York. But for me, in my experience being Riot Grrrl NYC, that faction was very queer. The New York, it was just, we were just all a bunch of like queeros putting on shows, getting together, talking things through, processing, you know, and I just felt like for me,
That's when you know it's got a little lesbianism has gotten in the
exactly
into the mix. Yeah.
So for me, and you know, I think it was way different in other parts of the country. So my experience is it was very much intertwined. So that's why I kind of loved both of them so much, because I did not experience that. I did because I was involved in hardcore music, hardcore scene in New York, and I did that when Riot Grrrl was so I was involved in hardcore. Riot Grrrl happened, Queercore kind of happened right after that too, homocore, from my experience. But you know, the hardcore scene, I left that a long time ago because of just kind of how they treated Riot Grrrl. Even though, you know, who I was involved with as far as like the scene in hardcore scene was Mike Bullshit, who's queer. Loved that guy. He's just such an amazing person. Scene that I was involved in. But it's like something happened, something changed for them with the whole Riot Grrrl thing. And I was like, that fucking sucks. So I started getting involved in Riot Grrrl, but it was just really intertwined.
Okay.
It was, for me, it was my formative years. And I would not change anything.
Let's see. So that's cool. We have everybody's got different experiences. I think that, you know, I was definitely a big fan of Riot Grrrl when I was in high school. And so I felt like it was very informative to who I was as a youngster, as was Queercore. Like I got my hands on Bikini Kill and Tribate at the same time. And Donna. And Donna. I got my hands on Donna. I think, you know, the thing that you were talking about, or the thing that I think now is more that reflection, or like as we've gotten older, as the decades have piled up somehow. I can't believe I'm 30. This is a long running inside joke. Anyway, but it's inside.
Your mind.
My mind. But anyway, what has happened in terms of like how popular culture, or like even whatever has talked about Riot Grrrl versus how it it's more or less ignored Queercore, right? So just the invisibilization or the erasure of our scene. That's what I have probably noticed quite a bit and been like, yeah, that's just called homophobia / whatever, queerphobia / whatever. But it's yeah, I would say like Riot Grrrl, like I feel like while I wasn't part of it, because from where I was standing, it was very like, for lack of a better word, it just didn't speak to me aesthetically, because it felt very feminine, and I just didn't ever feel feminine. So it felt a little bit like it didn't, not that I couldn't have belonged there or whatever, but it just didn't, I don't know, whatever. I just loved it, but wasn't part of it. But I loved it.
My perspective is that Riot Grrrl died off for me, and then it became like total like homocore, queercore.
Yeah.
You know,
eventually,
so it's you know.
Well, anyway, so it's more about how it's talked about, or how it gets recognized when other things don't get recognized.
Yeah, back then there wasn't Riot Grrrl bands or Queercore bands.
Yeah. Right, and we all loved each other or whatever. We were all like working together in a way, one way or another.
Well, it also occurs to me that like when I was reviewing zines, I didn't think twice about including zines that were basically Riot Grrrl zines. I mean, like I included reviewing, Bikini Kill and like the Bikini Kill zine. I mean, and girl germs, those were just. I mean, they were included, it wasn't really like, oh, this is a distinction that I'm limiting what I'm reviewing here or something, and of course the records too, would definitely be included. And I think, I had, I initially found out about Bikini Kill because I think like Beat Happening was on tour and they had the Bikini Kill zine on the merch table. And so I was like, what is this? Oh, this is amazing. And like, and then like, wrote to Kathleen and, got the tape and so on. So, I think, there is also sort of that cross pollination with the other stuff. But I think also, in terms of just like, well, who is music fans now of music, from the 90s, that's the sort of thing. It's like, well, what sort of kind of becomes the canon of the 90s or something. And, there's definitely some famous bands that got signed to major labels and stuff that are kind of part of the canon. And then there's sort of the bubbling under stuff that, people who are digging deeper into it get. But, do straight folks listen to Queercore for the music or, or is it, something where just, queers where the lyrics speak to them are interested in, I don't know, who the total fan base is,
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really interesting to think about how histories get written and obviously who's writing the histories and the way that then historical knowledge gets crafted and shaped, and then obviously affects younger people who are trying to learn about certain very near histories and either aren't getting a full story or getting, a kind of one-sided story. I go on about this all the time, but I get so annoyed when people talk about the definitive story of XYZ, like the definitive story of anything. I mean, because there's no definitive history. And so when you say like a definitive history of Riot Grrrl or something, and you don't include Queercore, or when you say a definitive history of music of the 90s, which is obviously broader and much more complicated to craft. But I mean, you're always going to get certain things centered over others. Certain things are always going to get marginalized. Certain voices are always going to be either excluded for reasons that have nothing to do with any ill intention, and sometimes for ill intention. And so I think it is often, a kind of reflection and a kind of historical reflection and a writing of history that leads to those kinds of marginalizations. And it was part of the reason I was so interested and thought it was so important to do this book for the genre series for Bloomsbury, because I had been getting really interested in looking at contemporary bands that cited queercore as influences, and thinking about how, while Riot Grrrl and Queercore were both so important to me at a particular time in my life, and I didn't see that distinction at all. It felt like shared, like a collective of really important music. Queercore has actually continued to have lives in so many different places and for different people and artists in ways that I think is really important to think about and talk about and document. And so I think I said this when we first started talking, but I really wanted to think about how to center queercore in a history, not to create a definitive history, because certainly anything in a 33 1/3 series is by its nature, small. And so there was so much more I wanted to put into this book that I couldn't, and so it's by no means definitive, but I wanted to really center that history and center a kind of multi-armed narrative of queer punk and resistance and queer community and just the joy of making really good music that spoke to people then and is still really speaking to people in the present. That's not a question. But maybe it opens up thinking about the kind of legacy of queercore and I'd be curious to know if that's something you all think about, the kind of legacy of the music, the zines, the labels, the legacy, Donna, maybe of the chainsaw message board, which I did my best to get back into when I was writing this book.
I did buy the domain name.
And just how the work that you all did still has so much significance. And yeah.
I mean, I feel like there's these repositories of it, because, you know, my riot girl is crass penis envy, you know, because due to age, that's what was coming at me with a kind of succinct critique of sexism.
Crass? I missed that.
Crass penis envy. You know, that's, and so, you know, I was in my 30s when Queercore and Riot Grrrl was happening, and so it didn't hit me in the same way. But for me, I think, you know, we have these embodied kind of first time impressions when it's like, oh yeah, you put that in yes, that's so right. And so for me, there was this two things that were happening at the same time, of penis envy and a kind of critique of sexism that was happening with the Brits, with au pairs and slits, where that I didn't see a corollary in the US with the Avengers. That's about like the man, but it's not really about sexism in particular in the way that penis envy is. But of course, women's music was very much about that. And so that's kind of my version of like the bikini queercore, where the queercore is women's music, which for me didn't have tough enough electric guitars. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to fix that. But certainly, you know, lyrically, in terms of a kind of transgression that was newish for me, in terms of being, you know, this is being spoken of. So I think we have, so the legacy of women's music and penis envy, you know, that lives on in me in a way that I don't really necessarily see reflected on social media, but I have really given up on the idea that we get to be in charge of our legacy. We are not in charge of our legacy, unless we are a mass shooter. But otherwise, you know, as far as the kinder versions, in a way, if we really wanted to be super famous, we would have probably chosen a different artistic path. What we wanted was to try to help others. And that's both we are thanked for that by having amazing fucking friends and good times. But we may not be thanked for that as far as being thought of as, you know, remembered, let's say. Because I don't know that we will be, and that somebody else is more remembered than we are. But is that why we got into it, or did we get into it to have a good time and try to be useful and be a cog in the wheel? Do we have to stand out, or can we be a cog? And so I think, because I'm so interested in archives, it's fine for me to spend an afternoon discovering something that's not on everyone's tongue, but I can see, oh, this was really important. And this is part of how this all happened. And people aren't talking about that, but I can tell this was, again, in the water at the time, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Gretchen.
Thank you, Mel.
Because I was just going to thank you, you know, for writing a book about queercore too. That's how it becomes not forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, so thank you for doing that. And it's not anything I really think about, you know, but like, no, of course, a queercore, like every moment of my life, you know what I mean? Like I'm that is me, you know, but what I mean about is my legacy. I don't think about that. I don't, because I know that there's so many people that came before me and also people after me in our existence, you know, that are so inspiring. And it's just keep the light lit.
Yeah. What if we get to be a part of something and that we don't have to be, you know, I mean, this is an old lady's egos talking, because my younger ego is not this. But, you know, I have been worn down to a sort of place of realizing again that these memories and these good times and getting to have what we got to have, you know, show after show that is just really fun.
Still though,
still staying up 9:30, 10 p.m., 10:30 p.m.
Still making art.
Exactly.
Being present, you know, and being alive.
Yeah.
Moshing, Melissa, because you're queercore all the time. So.
I mean, totally. I'm
going through life moshing.
You see me. I mosh every day.
Stage dive.
Gay moshing. Yeah, she stage dives just on the street.
Well, I think in some ways, you know, you're not giving yourselves full credit for what your work has meant to people. And I mean, I completely understand what you're saying, Gretchen, and I love what you said. But I think, and know from, you know, talking to contemporary young bands, and I think I said this at the beginning too, but in parts of the world where they're not allowed to perform as queer artists, finding your music, you know, learning about Meat Joy, finding copies of Holy Titclamps, hearing Team Dresch music, it has meant something, and it's given them a kind of strength to say, fuck it, I'm going to form this band and I'm going to perform, and I'm going to perform as I am. And I think that's such an incredible legacy. And yeah, it might not cheaply like adorn the cover of Rolling Stone or something, or make its way into, although you all are in Rolling Stone, but might not be part of those so-called definitive histories of certain music, but are so crucial in so many ways and are kind of at the center for so many people of what meaningful music and artistic and sonic and cultural history means to them. So
yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I think the feeling of the overlooked queer is pretty, you know, is a feeling. You know, it's a reality in a certain way, and also forms of you know, borrowing or appropriating from what we've so bravely put forward and putting it in a perhaps more palatable rather, you know, way. But I think that being artists, because I think we're all artists, you know, that there's an energy to creation. And if we get to have, like, I love that your definition of queercore isn't about a certain sort of sonic texture, but is about community, because that's over and over and over and over again. You know, I mean, there wasn't an internet. We had to look humans in the eye and go outside. Like, that really gave us skills that maybe I don't have the social media skills, but I can talk to the person behind the counter, you know, and I feel like what we got from playing in those VFW halls. Did y'all do that? American Legion Hall, VFW, the Elks Lodge, you know, that's where you can get a PA and put it in there. Heaven.
Yeah. And I guess that's what I'm saying too, where it's like, it's not anything that I think about, but the community, because I get so much from them, from the fans, you know, yeah. It's like, it's like, that's my survival, you know, and it is very emotional. And it's like, you know, I could cry just thinking about the poor lonely young ones, you know, like in Jody's new song, you know, in our new song that just got released. One song.
Coming out September 28th. Furthermore.
But, you know, but seriously though, it's just like, you know, the amount of letters we would get from kids and still do, and from adults, middle-aged people, where it's like, your music saved my life. And I'm like, you saved mine. You know?
Yeah. Well, because we want to feel like we matter. And the thing is that it is amazing in the face of these repressions that we see and that we are seen. And we've somehow constructed an atmosphere for that to be the case. You know, I mean, you know, like, I like your style, girl. You know, as an old lady, I still get that. And I think that is about, yes, this reciprocity of a kind of back and forth that is a desire to be among us, which is kind of a decision.
Well, can I ask each of you about just maybe one thing that's inspiring you right now, and music you're listening to, something maybe else, a film, something that you're finding that same kind of power or strength in at the moment? If that's cheesy, you don't have to answer, but I'd love to know. I'm guessing our audience would love to know.
Ours is easy. We've spent the last 3 months working on a new record. So we are spending a lot of creative energy and time with each other, making something that, like, we're really proud of it. So I'm feeling really inspired by that one.
Yes, I agree that is also very inspiring for me. You know, getting to be at this whatever age, 30, and still. Thanks for laughing, Gretchen. Still doing this, or like getting to like make a record and being like, oh wow, we can still play music, we can still write music, and we haven't tried to really do it like this in like a long ass time. So that is definitely filling us all with like the joy of creativity. I mean, it is a fucking joy. It's an honor and privilege to get to do that in your life, whether you get paid or recognized. It's just a privilege to get to do it
with your best friends.
With your best friends. I do want to say one other thing that's inspiring me right now is I read a book called the Light Eaters, and it's just all about the flora. So it's just all about plants.
Is it about photosynthesis?
It's just all about plants, just the light eaters. It just inspired me a lot about like looking at the world. Like I look at the world now. I have a hard time weeding. That's all I'll say. I'm like, oh my God, look at you.
Yeah, me too.
Look at you, beautiful weed. Who am I to tell you you shouldn't be in this garden? So anyway, just saying, that's a great book. And that inspired me.
Musically, lately for me, it's Mannequin Pussy all the way. Love that band. And Muna. Love the little like poppy queers.
Done.
Your time.
Gretchen, Larry Bob?
Well, it's sort of a tough question for me. And in some ways, I mean, it's like, yeah, am I just in the sort of the retrospective mode? You know, I mean, I went to a really great, there was a book release for We're Having Much More Fun, which is kind of like a book about like the post-punk era and you know, but sort of also, you know, talking to other folks like Martine from Los Crudos is in the book and so on. And it was, you know, like a cool event with like Penelope Houston and so on at City Lights. But it's sort of like, okay, am I just, you know, in this sort of, you know, what I think somebody was calling reunion core, you know, where it's just sort of like, okay, what are the folks who used to do stuff are they up to now? You know, is there still contemporary stuff? And I think, you know, there are, contemporary bands that I'm drawing a blank on that still seem to, that sort of embody, the kind of the values of self-expression and so on. I don't know. Yeah, I don't have a lot of like a great recommendation list at this point, but I'm sure something will come to me later.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of Radio Garden, internet radio, globally, and I really love listening to. I try to find not the pop stations from like Morocco and different places in former Yugoslavia and Serbia and Turkey. I love. Well, I have no idea how insipid the lyrics are, potentially, because I can't understand and I'm so judgy. So it's really great. It's like musically, this is amazing. And so I actually listen to that a lot. I've been going down a Patricia Highsmith rabbit hole in addition to my Rachel Cusk, but also I just got in the mail, speaking of, a kind of look back, is the new Joan as Policewoman, where she's re-recorded the first album, but that's not even the stuff that she has been posting live. And I think that for me, because Meat Joy met in Feb and we wrote a bunch of songs and we jammed for the first time since 1985. And there's something that's still there. Because these are these weird marriages, I've been married a lot. I've got a lot of spouses out there and girlfriends. But there is a chemistry. And if you're lucky enough to find it when you're young and to still have that, what is more amazing than to be able to do that? And so I think that this very interesting musical look back, because Joan Wasser is never going to run out of musical ideas, and to be able to have that emotion that is so forward with her work, with this, intuitive look, where that each of these songs could be done yet another 7 very radically different ways. I'll stop there because I could talk for a long time about that shit. Have you seen the television show on Netflix, Straight to Hell? Sometimes boring, sometimes exciting, always amazing fashions.
That's a good tip. We've been talking for about 55 minutes. Do we want to open it up to some audience questions? I believe if you have a question, you can type it in. Am I right, Chris?
Absolutely, yes. There is a chat feature on.
How many people are in there? I can't see anything.
Yeah, I can help with that. Sorry. In fact, you have one question already, and I think I can show it on the screen by clicking on this.
Okay.
And the question is, have the authors found the queercore movement to be a place that's affirming of trans identities? I'm curious whether the riot grrrl movement attracted TERFs.
I don't know really how to answer that, because definitely not a riot grrrl authority. I don't know. Can you put that question up again?
Yeah.
Because I just want to make sure that.
Totally.
Yeah, I think for the first part of that sentence, yes.
I just want to mention, when I was doing zine reviews, there were definitely a lot of really great trans zines. There was a zine from Toronto called Gender Trash, and the woman who did that also did radio shows and so on. And hopefully, some zines from that era are available on this website, qzap.org, the Queer Zine Archive Project. And so I'm not 100% sure if Gender Trash is available there, but I look online for that. There's also there was a lot of other trans zines. I'm just it's hard for me to remember every name off the top of my head. Willy Boy was one I remember. And there is, if you look on my old Queer Zine Explosion lists that I have online, they're there. I think I did a little article about trans zines at one point. I also reviewed a few trans bands. There's a band from England, 5 Inch Killers, I think that's mentioned in the book. Yeah. And and so there's some other bands as well that I'm drawing a blank on right now.
And when I was living in New York at the time when homocore was starting, a lot of trans friends were putting on shows with me. And, so I think at that time, definitely, and even more so now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think in terms of writing this book and doing the research for it and talking to people, but also kind of doing historical research, looking at archival materials and thinking about different identities within the kind of broad label of queer and queercore, I think certainly affirming of trans identities and certainly affirming of trans rights on the big whole, I would say. And I think that's something that historically didn't have the same importance that it does at our moment right now in the same way it does right now, just given the way trans rights are being kind of made salient and saliently trampled on. But certainly affirming of trans identities. And then I feel like I don't have the authority to speak to the second part of that question. I don't know the answer from the research or writing I've done, or from being someone who was a fan of Riot Grrrl and had friends who were listening to Riot Grrrl. I mean, we were certainly affirming of trans identities, but I can't speak to everyone who kind of got interested in Riot Grrrl.
Well, another kind of thing that did happen around stuff was around Michigan Women's Music Festival, and sort of the decisions on whether to play there, and then also there was Camp Trans near the festival, and so some people were more involved with Camp Trans rather than the festival. I mean, the festival doesn't exist anymore, but that was sort of one of the things that was happening in that era. I did want to also mention another. There's a documentary called Riot Acts that's about trans bands, and several different bands are in that. They sort of did a tour and filmed that while it was happening, and then released the documentary. So hopefully that's available online somewhere.
I just saw it. I was just at a festival and saw it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it was great.
What's it called?
Riot Act.
Oh, yeah.
It was screened at a festival here in Ottawa last September.
She's in Canada.
You're in Canada?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's been for how long, Gretchen?
Decades.
7.5 years. I'm a citizen.
Way to go.
I know. Dreams do come true, friends.
We do have another question in the chat. Let's see. Can you talk a bit about Mr. Lady and any other publications or projects that might be interesting to look into, and the story behind that at the time?
I had on my list that I wanted to ask you guys about Mr. Lady. So I'm glad someone in the audience did.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's see, my partner at the time, Tammy Ray, and I started that as a label in 96, 97. As many people, including Donna, just deciding to start their own labels back then. That was part of the DIY culture of queercore. And also Tammy Ray was a video artist, so we combined it, and it didn't, maybe didn't take off as much in the video aspect of it, but we combined it as a record label and also a way to distribute different people's video art, which was incredible art. I mean, we were in conjunction at some point with the Miss Moviola project that Miranda July did. We put out a lot. I mean, we just put out a lot of different kind of queer media. Do you say media? I don't know. But yeah, I'm not sure what, that was, can you talk about Mr. Lady? I mean,
Oh, you did.
I did it. Okay, yeah.
And actually, Damon was Amy Ray's label.
Right.
Yeah. That was putting out all sorts of Southern queers.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the version of Jesus Christ Superstar with the Indigo Girls playing Jesus and Mary Magdalene. I think they released that as a record on their album.
I've seen it.
I've seen it.
It's tight. I don't want to see those Indigo Girls as Jesus and Mary. Does anybody know who the Indigo Girls are?
Jesus.
You guys, have you heard of Jesus? That's actually how I learned about Jesus, was through that opera. I grew up atheist, so I'm like,
That's a very, very great piece of information to for the historical record. Project might be interesting. Oh, sorry, Larry Bob.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different rabbit holes you could go down in terms of this. And I mean, sometimes it's like, sometimes it's these fossilized website sort of things. Like on my website, I have these like links, and all the links are dead now. But like if you go into web.archive.org and plug in those links, then you can maybe, find some part of the the website has existed at the time. Like for instance, I had this section on there, I had queer bands on tour, and I would try to, if I heard about a tour, I would try to list the things. And so like maybe those bands' websites aren't around, but you could maybe try to find, their music online. Or, I think of other things that were like Sister Spit was like, a spoken word, tour that Michelle T spearheaded, and a lot of people went on. There was also like I think the Dr. Frock Racket tour that was, I think, who is Rachel? I don't know who all was involved in that. Rachel from The Need. Does anybody know? Can anybody say who else is on Dr. Frock Racket?
There was a brief touring spoken word music type of I don't know if we call it cabaret performance, but Jody was like the MC. That's what I remember.
Fraggle Rock, New York.
Oh, right.
Oh, and then there was like a space like Dumba in New York. There was a lot of queer spaces. So like Dumba, it was also a place where Queeruption was held, one of the Queeruption festivals.
And Gay Shame, which I played at.
Yeah, Gay Shame, right? And then that movie Short Bus, which you shouldn't watch with your parents, but it's that was filmed at Dumba, and that's sort of like in a ways like an artifact of that time, and like Justin Vivian Bond is in that, and so on.
So good. Also, when we were bringing up Sister Spit, there's a connection. Mr. Lady put out a comp of greatest spits. So we had the connection point to them as well. Yeah, there's just the web. There's the web of it all. We're all connected.
And there's going to an archive. Might I recommend?
Yeah.
Putting your body and seeing what's in, looking at the finding aid or going there and seeing what there is. I call myself latchkey kid in the archive, because when I was, my stepfather was a sociology professor, and in the evenings they'd be like, can you just go to the library? And I was like, looking up homosexuality in the card catalog. Yes, I can. Old issues of the Ladder, in the 70s. There's all sorts of information in the archive.
Oh, the card catalog. I would just walk in and be like, I know something's in there. And then finally I'd get the courage up to like go through the H's real quick.
Wow, really? I love this. Wait, I had no idea. This is I didn't do this.
So
I sometimes say that I came out in the HQ 76 aisle. This
is amazing.
That's what you file homosexuality under.
Oh, there's some sort of creative project has to happen with the generation of humans who did the library H card.
It's in Fun Home as well. Allison has a she's got It's
Okay.
it's in Fun Home, which I was just like, Elsa, I did that too. And I mean, they would just say, "Can you entertain yourself?" And I was like, "I think I can, yeah."
Cool. Love it.
Yeah, here in San Francisco, the GLBT Historical Society archive, that's where I donated a lot of the zines that I reviewed for Queerzine Explosion. And they have a sort of an online finding aid where you can just search through the periodicals by name and kind of see what they have. So, and I'm sure there's, there's the Fails collection at NYU. There's, Barnard has a really great Riot Grrrl collection. And you went to a few of these archives, Audrey, researching, right?
Yeah. And Human Sexualities at Cornell. I got to make a bid for that one. Very good.
Tom Jennings put all the homocores online, so you can just print them out.
Yes.
Oh my
Well,
God.
he actually did a printout. There is also a book version of homocore available now too. Yeah,
Awesome.
they have it at Fabulosa in San Francisco, and I think there's online places you can get it.
But there's probably nothing you could do in Los Angeles. I fear there's nothing, unless maybe you went to the public library. Maybe there's archives there.
Well, the One Institute, the One Institute
Exactly.
archive at USC is really good. I spent a day there.
Oh.
The things I pulled there included the papers. I think Jim Usling, he was involved in Theoretical. It was sort of like this series of parties, and he also edited a magazine that JD's clipped a lot of things and reprinted in JD's. He was editor of In Touch, and then also there was also Craig from the Bags, Alice Bags band. He also wrote for the LA Weekly a lot, and they had his papers, and I pulled his papers and looked at those. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to say archives. I mean, before you even said it, Gretchen, I think archives are such amazing places to pull out things that you might not have kind of any knowledge of or access to otherwise, because though a lot of stuff is digitized and you can find some stuff digitally through archives, and the Queerzine Archive Project is absolutely fabulous. There's so much stuff in archives, and I mean, as an academic who, has spent so much time in so many different archives over the years, I love an archive, and I love the practice of archiving, and I almost became an archivist. I did it, but I'm sort of an amateur one, I guess. I mean, there's nothing I love more than kind of getting into an archive, looking at someone's papers or a collection that a library has, and finding something that you've just never seen mentioned before, and then taking that with you, and then going on a really, deep dive to get to the
She
heart.
doesn't mean taking it with you.
Oh, no.
There's no part of her that's saying, take that piece of paper and stick it in your bag.
Don't
I
steal
definitely
the archival materials.
Digital ones, I definitely saw these.
Materials. Taking the knowledge with you, which is what an archive is for. Taking that knowledge with you and doing a deep dive. And it just allows you to trace out so many different routes and connections between so many different kind of moments, artists, record labels. I mean, sounds, kind of scenes in different places. Kaia, I think you mentioned the kind of intertwinedness of so many different things. And one of the things I had wanted to do in this book, but it just wasn't possible, was to create like the most not normie family tree of queercore that just sort of showed all of the different kind of interconnections and overlaps and layers, and kind of layers of time, but also layers of space and connections between and among so many different people doing so many different kinds of work in different places. But first, that's really hard to just do in 2D. And I had it really beautifully imagined in my mind what that could look like. But it's also just hard to kind of do that in a practical sense for a book like this. But I think there are so many interesting ways that you out there could, do your own research into queercore, into queer punk bands, into queer filmmakers, and other visual artists, writers, and could think about how you develop those own kinds of trees and interconnected webs that can really be so powerful. I've tried to put a bunch of names of just anyone to kind of get you started in this book. And like I said, it's by no means definitive, but I hope it gives some jumping off points. I mean, every time I write a book, I hope, most it inspires someone to take something they found in it and to kind of create their own research and writing path from it, and to, write and make something new that then I and others end up picking up and thinking, wow, I'm so glad I know about this.
I think that in the archive I was reading about, Paris, the expats at the beginning of the 20th century. And that completely, when I was, 14, I was like, I imagined my life. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to meet lesbians and I want us to have affairs, and then we remain friends and we have all this art, and I was able to feel from the archive, oh yeah, this is what I want. And it, it happened. The mycelial network that sometimes results in the fruiting body known as a release, a zine or whatever, but the underground mycelium that is all of our, all the love I have for, oh, look at those. I mean, look at those three. I think I met y'all in the early 90s. Like, we've been friends for like 30 years.
Yep. Gretchen, technically you met me when I was 17. But
technically I met you when you were 17. But that doesn't make any sense, because aren't you 30 now?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Yes.
It's incredible. And I do think that what the archive can just be really fertile for looking at something as weird as people's papers, because of course that's not their whole life. That's just that. And that's just what ended up there. Like, how it was curated, but it still can be so inspiring, I think. And anyways, yeah, I'm with you. The archive is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly love hearing all the advocacy for archives and, of course, libraries for your secondary resources. Los Angeles Public Library is a great place to go and do your research. So please come visit us. Art, music, and recreation, as well as social science. You'll find a lot of great queer stuff. Any last words from any of you before we wrap things up?
Thanks for having us. It's so fun to be at the library.
It's been thank you.
And thank you for the participants and the great questions. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, really appreciate you, all of you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, Gretchen, Larry, Bob, Donna, Kaia, Melissa, for being on this panel. This is a total dream for me. I feel so honored to be here with you all. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm so glad we all met.
It's like a chainsaw chat reunion.
Yeah. This video.
Nice to Larry, Bob, and Gretchen I haven't seen you guys in a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're getting lots of thank yous in the comments. And
Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to add this book. This is the book that we're talking about. So do check it out. We'll have it soon at Los Angeles Public Library. And if I might be so bold as to plug my own thing, I'll be back on YouTube next month. I'll be talking with Craig Dworkin. It's going to be in conversation with the Getty's Nancy Perloff. They'll be discussing Dworkin's The Sound of Thinking, a listener's companion to conceptual music. It's a very fun and curious overview of completely impersonal and novel systems for music creation. So pretty far away from what we were talking about today, but intriguing nonetheless. And thank you all again so much. It was really a huge pleasure. And come visit us. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.